Happy Friday, everybody.
If you can't help.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday. All right. So today's session is inspired by Mr. Mike Ferry. That's kind of, listening to some of his podcasts, and I borrowed some of his ideas and I incorporated a lot of my own ideas into it. So if it sounds similar, it's similar, but I'd like to think I've improved it a tad. I want to start with a foundation, and the foundation is, if you're waiting for the market to change, or your clients are waiting for the market to change, it's always going to be changing. Okay. And if you get frustrated, or if you have people that are frustrated, oh, interest rates have gone up, there's no inventory, there's a list of challenges in transitioning markets. There's a list of challenges in strong markets. Okay. Um, if the markets weren't dynamic, all this AI that Glenn talks about would completely eliminate us. We would be irrelevant, and we would be also very lowly. We would have a very low income opportunity if we didn't have any dynamic changes or adjustments in the market. So if you wish there was more inventory or less inventory, or if you wish for other things to change in the market, wish is not a strategy. It's not going to change where we are. Let's adapt to the marketplace we have. And lastly, do not ever let the market change or alter your expectations of what you can do. Okay. True professionals, their income is not adjusted or impacted by whether the interest rates drop, whether inventory is high or low. True professionals figure out how to navigate through, these adjustments. Okay. So I just wanted to start that and say, don't ever, ever, ever let the market, your neighbor, your clients determine what your income level is going to be, because the only person that has the power to do that is you. You have that control. A few other things I want to talk about is we're always emphasizing, personal growth, resilience, and success. Okay, that's what's going to be the benchmarks that keep us going. We're constantly. I'm 29 years in the Remax world, and she's 30 some years in the industry, and I'm still learning all the time. Okay. You need to learn from the past. Usually you learn from failures, not success. Okay. When you have success, you kind of take that for granted, but you really have your hard lessons when you fail. Learn from your mistakes, but don't dwell on them. Okay. These are all valuable lessons. Lingering on them can cost you time and money, and tens of thousands of dollars annually in our business, and millions of dollars throughout a career or a lifetime. Right? It's massive what it can do negatively to impact us. But you got to keep hitting that bell to let people in.
I am.
So newsflash: every single person here makes mistakes. You're going to make mistakes in the future. Hopefully, we learn from them. Hopefully, we learn from mistakes from our peers, and we can minimize them. But I don't remember who had this quote, but if you can just be correct 51% of the time, that 2% margin can truly make you an expert. Okay. Done is better than perfect. Okay. And there's no way to avoid having any type of mistakes in your career. You would never learn. Your experiences shape who you are. Okay. You wouldn't be as good as you are if you hadn't failed and made adjustments. There is nobody in this business, even if you had the best mentor, who's gone straight to the top. Okay, we always, stub our toes. We learn from our experiences. We learn from our failures. We move forward. Okay. Number 3 is a Mike Ferry quote here: difficult times build your character. Okay, there's always difficult times in this business. if you're a lender, there's no vanilla mortgages that sell right through. There's always, there's usually some challenges with those. And any of our lenders on the phone right now or on the Zoom? Because what I've heard is the super easy loans, you have to discount, and they often can get done by anybody, so they tend to be less valuable. Think of our business the same way. Some of the buyers that are picky, that are challenging, that are difficult, those are the ones that you can make money by differentiating and stepping up and finding a better way to serve them and get the job done. Sellers, since the beginning of time, sellers have had a bias towards they have a pair of glasses that they look through, which makes their house worth 10 to 15% more. Have you come across any of those? Anybody? Right?
Yeah.
I see you shaking your head, Beth. Like, how do you engage a seller that's not grounded with reality?
Well, a lot of times what I'll do is, and I know it takes a little bit of extra time, but when they're very difficult about that, I will take them and just show them one or two competing homes that's similar to theirs. The other thing I'll do is I'll ask them to walk into their home as if they don't live there, and they're the buyer, and critique it. And they usually answer their own objection.
Right. So I think you hit the nail on the head. You need to ask them questions instead of tell them, because when you tell them, it's like that Charlie Brown thing. They're hearing, but they're not listening. Right? There's a big difference. Number 4 is avoid negative people at all costs. Okay, and here's a telltale sign of a nice person that can be a negative influence on your life and your career. If people go around saying, "Oh man, I can't catch a break." You ever hear people saying that? Run. Okay, they could be the nicest people, but they're a cancer to your career. Okay, they will bring your mind down. Surrounding yourself by positive people will help you foster success. What do they say? You become what? Anybody know what you become?
5 of the people you surround yourself with.
You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Yes. So, for some of us, you got to pick some new friends, and for others that are hanging around, people on this call that aren't doing that, you might want to coach them up. Just kidding. But you really do become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And, I was fortunate to be on a couple of recruiting appointments with our team. And, one of the most impressive things that 2 of the candidates had said was, "Wow, I didn't know that Remax is, 2 to 4 times more productive than the competition." We brought that little national slide there, and they were like, "I think if I was surrounded by people that were producing and not at one of these discount companies, my business would grow because." Right now I'm surrounded by, part-timers and people who aren't committed to the business. It's not a pitch for Remax. We're all at Remax now, but it's just to give you an idea of how, mindset works and how people recognize that you want to be around positive, productive people. Okay. If you ever get frustrated, okay, every frustration and difficulty holds an equivalent opportunity and lesson. Okay, and some of these tie in together where we grow the most when we get challenged. When you're in sports, if you're going to the gym to work out to build up your strength, it's not the first rep that's the easy one, it's the last rep that's the difficult one that has the most impact. Okay, if you're running, and you don't stress yourself to the point of failure, okay, you probably will not optimize your ability. And in real estate, the failures, the challenges, they make us better. And, hopefully, we take them for what they are and we use them as learning experiences, right? So if you, lose a listing and, Marilyn, I'm looking at you because I know we had a great referral coming in, but we made a poor choice on how to be clear about how to manage that with another agent, right? Now, I know our agent learned from that experience, right? But it was painful, right? Down to the bitter end. And I guarantee you that, our agent learned several valuable lessons from that experience, right? So you can be bitter or you can learn and grow from it. Focus on what you can control. Okay, that's pretty powerful. Can we control the interest rates? Can we control the number of homes that come onto the market? I mean, practically we can't. I mean, we can control if we have a bigger piece of it, but I think the market's what the market is. Even a distinguished gentleman like Howard or Abe, you don't have a hotline to the Federal Reserve to tell them to lower the rates, do you? I
No.
mean, the president can't even get the Federal Reserve to lower the rates. Okay. So if you're allowing those circumstances to influence your income and how you do your business, it's very, very limiting. It's tremendously limiting. We need to focus on what we can control. What can we control, Abe?
We can only control ourselves, really.
Right. So you can control the amount of time that you're dedicating towards the things that are going to get you where you need to be. In your case, it's making connections and making contacts, correct?
Constantly. A day doesn't go by when I don't say, what am I doing today to create a possibility? And it keeps me going, buddy. And you know that. You see me in the trenches.
Abe, you're probably one of the most persistent people I've ever met in my life, and that's a compliment to you.
Thank you.
I mean, just earlier this week, our candidate probably rescheduled with you 4, 5, 6 times.
At least.
At least, right?
Yep.
And then I have to be honest with you. I don't know if she copied you on it, but she actually sent me a text message before I got to my car saying that she appreciated the meeting, and she's felt bad that she kept blowing you off.
Well, you know what? You will learn from it. We learn by doing. We learn from experience. And life's got to go on.
So focus on what you can control. You can control the activities that you do. You can control the discipline you make. You can control the conversations that you have. For me, okay, when I'm in a situation, and my situations are exclusively, working with you. If you say, hey, I have a difficult buyer or I have a difficult seller, and I inject myself into the circumstance. If there's no challenge, then there's no benefit to me, right? I want to see somebody give us a challenge, say, hey, I want to overprice my house. I don't want to pay a reasonable commission. I don't want to do all these things. And, we need to figure out a way to have a conversation, mostly by asking questions to get us to the outcome that we want. And also to have an abundance mentality where it's okay to walk away from business, right? I mean, who here would like to have, an extra 6 deals the next year? Now, who's willing to walk away from 1 or 2 to get to the 6? Okay, not so many hands. Okay, a few more are going up. But if you're not prepared to walk away from a relationship, you have no leverage. And I don't mean that to be arrogant or negative, but there are people, and Marilyn, when I think about it, like, if our agent had the ability to have a conversation and say, this doesn't work for me, I might not be the right agent, then it might have defined a completely different relationship, correct?
Correct.
I think it would have been a better outcome. But the only way
Yes.
that we learn from this is because of this painful experience, right?
Agreed.
Rob,
Agreed.
And
please, I'm just gonna mute everyone.
yeah. So
Okay.
Marilyn, if you want to unmute yourself for just a second.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
So I want to just describe what happened, and then I wanted to take a look at how it could have been better. Okay. Many of us have a lot of connections through our years in the business. I get a call for what seemed to be a great opportunity for a listing in a town. I related to Marilyn. Marilyn, gave it to the person that was up that day. Called the agent. And I think they started out by, instead of a referral fee, they said they would split it, right?
No, they never said that in the beginning. They just said it was a referral. And
Okay.
it turns out that agent that was referring it was best friends with the seller. And then after she accepted the referral and she talked to them, then they changed the whole thing and said, oh, well, our referral is going to be 50-50. But they really kind of took advantage of her because even though 50-50, she paid, I think it cost her like $1,700 between her photos and videos because it was a big house here in Westfield. And it cost her, and then the other agent refused to pay for any of the expenses. They really took advantage of her. And I agree with you. I think if she would have been a little firmer from the beginning, the seller was a handful. The seller was a handful.
Right. So basically, it was a good thing that became a challenging thing that now is a learning thing, correct?
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So if everybody on this call, everybody on this Zoom can learn, like sometimes you get your number's called, somebody walks in the office, I have a referral for you, whatever. Make sure that you have clarity and you have a conversation and don't just, jump the gun and say, all right, great, I can do that. I know that area, I can sell that. Okay. It was a positive outcome, but I don't think it was an equitable outcome. Does that make sense? Because I really feel like our agent got taken advantage of a little bit.
She got taken advantage of, but there were a few times during the process where she just wanted to walk away. And I said, absolutely not. You've come this far, and it was a big sale. It was a big sale. I said, you've come this far and you've put a lot of work into it. And like you said, Rob, I told her, just let's get through this. But now you've learned, and next time it won't be like this. So she did learn from it, which was good.
So I'm going to put out a question here. So your strongest muscle is your worst enemy. Who knows what that is? Somebody says it's the heart you have in the business.
Your brain.
Nope. Your brain. Yep. It's the strongest muscle and it's also your worst enemy. Because if you don't control that, okay, it can take you down, some rabbit holes and it can sabotage your success. Okay. So it's your strongest muscle, and it can be your worst enemy. Okay. Train it well, train it well, train it well. And then when you are through, train it some more, right? That's giving it a good diet. Okay. Not watching negative information. Okay. It is, you give your mind a opportunity to be positive, continually practice the discipline that will get you where you need to be. Worrying about uncontrollable factors just wastes energy and brings you down. So many successful people say, limit the amount of time you read media and watch the news because most of it's not empowering, most of it's negative, right? I mean, they rarely talk about, peace somewhere. They always talk about there's something negative happening. Somebody's shot, somebody's killed, there's a war, there's a problem. And that doesn't serve us well. That serves to bring us down. So, give your mind, your strongest ally, your biggest muscle, a good diet, and stop worrying about things you can't control. If interest rates go up, I'm not leaving the business. I hope you're not. I hope you're not planning on making less money. Okay. I hope we're planning on how to pivot, how to serve the clients. Okay. Focus on positive energy, learn to do things you've never done before. Okay. To achieve your goals, to achieve goals you've never ever achieved before, you need to learn how to do things you've never done before. Right. So if you want to sell, $20 million worth of real estate, last year you did 8 million, you need to do things that you've never done before. You need to get a little bit uncomfortable. Okay. You need to stay disciplined and consistent. Okay. Success comes from repeated, focused effort. It's not, and it's never been, never will be luck. It never will be like a single home run. Those people who have, quick success but don't have good habits, they burn out of the business. Okay. Especially if they think that they've arrived and they stop learning and investing in themselves. You have to keep learning, keep improving, maintain a strong work ethic, take responsibility for your habits. And you need to work until your bank account looks like a phone number. Work until that's a Mike Ferry quote for some of you Ferryites. How many digits in a phone number? Keep working until your bank looks like that. So these rules align well with the structured approach. And if you surround yourself by people who embrace more of these positive habits, because we all have negative habits, but 51% can make you an expert, right? If you're Warren Buffett, you're trading stocks. If you're right 51% of the time and you're wrong 49% of the time, that 2% margin will make you billions. And that 2% margin in our business will make us wealthy beyond belief, right? Somebody like Tony Bureau, you keep prospecting after what, 30 years? Tony, how many years? You're on mute, sir. You're still on mute. Tony.
Yeah, it's my fault. I was talking to an agent this morning that she was worried about the interest rate and all that. I said, it doesn't matter what it is. People need to buy, people need to sell. Just talk to people and you'll find a business. That's all you got to do. Don't worry about anything else.
Right.
Because everything, it comes down to how much down, how much a month. They're not paying cash. How much down, how much a month. That's all. If they can afford it, they'll buy it. If they can't, certainly they have to adjust the price.
And Tony, let me ask you to be humble for a moment here. Like, are there a lot of agents out in your marketplace that if people chose, they would be disserved because they're not committed to the industry, right? I mean, somebody could be extremely fortunate to land on you to help them out, right? With your experience, your commitment, your integrity, right? Tony?
Oh, certainly. You got to always feel that you are the best person for the job. You got to feel that way. You got to know that way. Yeah. And you got to believe that way. Yeah.
And is what you do important in people's lives?
Oh, for sure. Like now, I'm negotiating 3-4 offers for this house, which I know the area for a long time. And I told the seller, I said, you just got to be patient. I know you want to sign that contract, but you just got to be patient, because we need to figure out if these people, they'll be able to buy your house. Because if they are not going to buy your house, you're just wasting their time. The time they have, especially now that the house is vacant. Yeah, it makes more difficult. But I know you want to jump on it. I say, but let me get all the ducks in a row. Let me see if they can do it. If they can do it, more power to them. I'm not stopping anybody from buying what they want to buy.
So somebody would be fortunate to land with any of us that are here investing in our career. Okay, and if that is in fact true, which it is, beyond the monetary motivation, I think we all have a moral obligation to help as many people as we can.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, that, yes.
But think about that, because I think a lot of times we're programmed and we're thinking about things like recognition, right? We all love to be recognized. Some of us, that's what pulls us through the tougher times of the business. Other people, have pictures of, financial objectives or financial goals that they want to achieve. Like they want to buy a house in the mountains. They want to buy, an RV. They want to buy a plane. They want to buy a boat, whatever it is. Those are things that strive. They want to put their children through college without debt. All these things that are monetary for us, right? Those are our motivations. But if you think about it and you say, beyond that, you also have a moral obligation to help people, to be honest, to learn how to communicate with them better, right? Because I think one of the biggest disappointments, I'm going to say, in the industry is we have a lot of people with tremendous knowledge, high integrity, but sometimes the confidence isn't there, the discipline isn't there to do it all the time. And it's a minor pivot in communication that's the difference between, doing 20-30% more business, which means that you're impacting in a positive way 20 to 30% more people, right?
Hi, Rob. Can I get to this one for a minute?
Sure.
You should surround yourself with good people. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Adona, who did a great job. Sent too many emails to remind the people about the rally. You are so lucky to have her.
Thank you, and thank you for attending the rally. I think many of you who attended the New Jersey rally got a lot out of it.
Thank you, Karma.
Oh, my pleasure. You deserve it.
Yeah, and thank you, Adona. So who would be motivated? Who's the personality that could be motivated more by helping people than by, having a picture of a new car that you want to achieve or a new house? Who's that person? Okay, I see a few hands. I find a lot of successful real estate professionals who come from backgrounds of fields like teaching or social work. They're doing things to help people, and then they turn around and their bank account is fat, right? Because they're doing the right thing to help people, right? So sometimes, they say if you watch a clock, it moves really slowly, right? If you have somebody that needs to close a transaction, that's the one that's always going to fall apart, right? But if you're doing all the right things, you turn around and wow, success is there. Okay. So it's worth writing down is that, even when you may not feel like doing the things that you do, if you tap into that moral obligation that you have to help and serve people, it will give you the inspiration to do well.
Probably a good time to tell a quote I heard yesterday on a Buffini podcast. I listen to podcasts constantly. He said, when you look, I can't remember the guy's name. He said, when you look at your business, especially being in real estate, you need, in fact, I put this in my notes, you need to be big enough to deliver and small enough to care. I thought that was so impactful. I had to write it down while I was driving.
Yeah. When you, I'm sorry, Beth. Oops. So when you, I'm going to technically. Okay. I'm doing it live, so we have a problem. So now I got to figure out where my train of thought was. So you're talking about, being small. What was your quote there, Beth, that you had?
Big enough to deliver. And that doesn't mean you have to be more than one person, but big enough to deliver, small enough to care.
And I think, you're probably like me, you take tons and tons of notes and then they're all over the place, or maybe you're even more organized and you put them someplace centrally where you review them regularly. But here's the good news is I think even though you don't remember them all, I think as you put, positive energy into your brain, what happens is over time, you wind up, magically coming up with solutions from the proximity that you have, or the putting yourself in situations where you're always feeding yourself good content. You know this is a Mike Ferry quote. Says don't, when you're in your career and you're looking around, don't compare yourself to others. And I thought this was good, as comparison is the thief to all joy in life. And he used his example of, he wants to be a better golfer, but if he compares himself to professionals, then he just feels like, not well. I won't use the language he said, but it's not positive when you compare yourself to something that's not possible for him to be a scratch golfer. Another going back to Mr. Mike Ferry, who's, his old material is as timeless as his new material, just may have different ways of delivering. But, he talks about, prospecting can solve every problem that you could possibly have in your business.
That's the Bible. Yeah.
So prospecting can solve any problem that you have in your business.
Well, sure, because you need to be consistent every day. It's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy, because after all these years, it's not easy for me either. But that is, we had some agents that they had what they call 90-day cycle. That for 90 days you do the same thing over and over and over again, and you'll see you'll be the champion. You'll achieve a lot that you achieve that you have not achieved before. And it's really true that there is really true there, but that is really true.
So another quote from the timeless Mike Ferry: "Smile more. You don't own all these problems. Okay, your attitude influences your behavior and your outcome, right? So if you expect, oh, this deal is gonna fall apart, it's usually gonna fall apart. Okay, if you have the mindset and you just smile, you do everything you can, overwhelmingly, way more times than not, it finds a way to work itself out, right? And you're avoiding that person who says, "Oh, I just can't catch a break," right? That person that can't catch a break, that's a self-inflicted wound that they have. It's the way that they program their brain, that they're just waiting for it to fall apart. I know this deal is going to fall apart. I know it's not going to work, and then that devil or demon in your mind, influences how things go, and it really is true.
Well, everything has to do with attitude, approach, how you approach something, and the expectation. Once you balance that, then things will get better. That things will get better.
So there's a well before Darren Hardy, Zig Ziglar talked about the accumulation effect, and it's basically also known as the compound effect.
Mhm.
Okay. And the compound effect is small, constant actions over time lead to huge results, huge changes, right? Small, constant, repetitive actions. Basically, it's, you know, repetitious boredom, right? Mastering these repetitive tasks that give you an edge. Living in a world of abundance.
Mhm.
Okay. You know, our pie is a little bit smaller. We have new competitors in our industry, right? We have Zillow, we have now we have Redfin owned by Rocket Mortgage, right? There's all these new competitors, but there's always been competitors. Okay, there's always been challenges. You know, back from the beginning of my career, you know, when the computer came out where you could log on to the computer through like a DOS screen and you heard that like handshake thing and you had to look up stuff like that. People were talking about the demise of the real estate profession back then. Okay, and then when we had IDX and we shared our information, people thought, oh, real estate agents will be gone. People will just go online and they'll find their house online and there'll be no need for us. Right? But the usage of the real estate profession has only gone up over time. The process, although it's become, you know, more transparent, it's also become more complex, right? I mean, there's so much data, you can be completely overwhelmed. And, you know, we make the complex simple, right? That's what we get paid to do. Okay, we get paid to make the complex simple. Our job is no longer the gatekeeper to the information. Our job is now redefined as, you know, taking all these variables, sorting them out, and giving consumers the process of completing the transaction.
Rob,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Rob, can I interject 1 minute here?
Yep.
You know, you're absolutely right that there's a need to develop habits, and we started out talking about the an adaptation to the marketplace as it changes and taking advantage of it. And I noticed that in our office, one of the complaints that we've had over the past 2 or 3 months has been that the showings of our open houses have kind of not been very good. We just haven't had a lot of traffic like we used to have 4 or 5 years ago. And I think Brian Neugebauer will attest to that. He's got a couple of listings that I know of that have just been dry. But at the same time, we posted several homes to be available for open houses for this coming weekend, the holiday weekend. And maybe Tyler can comment on this, but I don't think we've had a single person respond to open houses that are available. I mean, you've got people that have gone off on vacations as clients, et cetera. But when you logically look at it, yeah, our buyer pool is thin right now, but for a lot of people that are actually looking to find a home, they don't have the luxury of doing it on Wednesdays during the day. They have to schedule themselves for what's available. So you have a 3-day weekend. And I'm thinking, my goodness, the law of averages would say there's going to be some people out looking at homes simply because that's their work schedule. It may not be the luxury home of $1 or $2 million like we like to chunk down in Scottsdale, but it's a home. And the price ranges that I'm talking about at the homes that Brian has available, one's almost 800,000, the other one's Well, I think it's around 550 or so, 500. Anyway, nice sales. Can't find anybody to sit the home. We're all out of town. We're all grabbing the 3-day weekend. Well, we also have the luxury to schedule our vacations differently than what the world does. And I'm just wondering, am I off base here, thinking that, for an example, I'll bet you any amount of money if I drive around Scottsdale this weekend, I'll bet I don't find a half a dozen homes being open. I'll bet I don't have 2 or 3. And yet I know there's people that are out looking. They're going to have to call their agent and schedule, et cetera. But whatever happened to something as simple as the work habit of holding an open house, even if it's inconvenient for a holiday weekend?
And I'm gonna piggyback on that, Howard, with my own thought here, which is, if you're gonna do an open house, make it an event. Okay, don't do it just like everybody else. Okay, and if you don't have a huge budget, we have an agent up in one of our Bergen County offices who puts out about 27 signs. I think she had 30 and 3 of them got ripped off. But she goes out and puts out 27 directional signs all over town. And after doing that for years, people think that, number one, that she controls all the inventory in town because she goes and does that. She gets more participants to her open houses than anybody else, just because there's directionals all over the town. Her competition probably can't stand her because she's doing that. But it doesn't cost you a whole lot. It's a small thing. And also think about how you can reinvent, an open house or an experience for a consumer, right? I mean, I know overwhelmingly these are not our agents, Howard, but did you ever walk into an open house and the agent seems annoyed that you walked in? Right?
No.
And then they come up to you and they say, "You have an agent, right?"
Yeah.
Like it's okay. They might think that, but they're already giving you a. Let me look at what I called that here. The default no, right? It's like you walk in, can I help you? No, I'm just looking, right? It's that programmed defense mechanism that we have, and I would bet that there's a percentage, I don't know what the percentage is, of people that say that, oh yeah, I have a buyer's agent just to back us off, right? That really don't have a buyer's agent agreement. Okay. And I'm not suggesting that you interfere with the buyer's agent agreement, but what I am saying is you just make sure that, that people are telling you the truth when you're talking to them.
By the way, I just got a note from Brian. In fact, he does have an open house on one of the 2 listings I was talking about tomorrow. And kudos to you, Brian. That's great.
I think that was a setup, Howard. I'm kidding. Who has some listings that haven't sold? Who's carrying more than 3 listings that have been on the market for longer than a week? Anybody? Brian, Alina. So Alina, you have more than 3 listings that haven't sold. What are you going to do?
Well, getting creative for open houses. I'm actually having one tomorrow, which is a long weekend. And instead of looking at the competition in my market, let's say in a condo or a community, I've actually reached out to my competing agents and asked them to do a progressive open house. And what I find, even if they say yes or no, is I'm able to ask some questions about what they're going through, so I can position my listing a little differently or have different conversations with my sellers. So just trying to get some intel by default since I have the other agent on the phone. That's one thing. And obviously more social media and trying to highlight the positives in each property.
Now, if you were to go back in time and you have the listing opportunity again, is there anything you would do differently?
Yes.
Okay, please share.
I mean, you and I have had this conversation about making sure that it's priced right on day one. Seems like and this is nothing new. Everybody knows that if somebody wants to get 300, they want to list it for 330 because they think people are gonna, and we're gonna end up at 300 anyways. But the reality is that you spend all those days on the market sitting, looking ridiculous and wasting away opportunities of people who would have seen the property at 300 and getting some activity. It's a hard conversation. Like you say, sellers have pink rose colored glasses when they see their own property and they want to shoot high. So need to start with data and say, like you mentioned in our meeting the other day, bring a business case or show them something that's happening in the market so they don't think it's you just saying it because you want a higher commission or you want a quick sale. It's reality versus perception.
So, how often do you communicate back to your sellers the state of what's happening with their
Every other
listing?
day I have it drilled myself, and whenever I see something going on, I just say FYI, FYI, this is similar to yours, this is worse than yours, this is better than ours. Let's keep this in mind when we get offers or when we don't get offers. This is the reason why we're not getting offers. Because there are many times better options. And we talked about this too, that, in a buyer's market, our buyers have more inventory to look at. They're pickier, at least in South Florida.
Right.
They have options. I mean, if I was a buyer, put myself in their shoes, why am I gonna pay another 50 grand for something that's, that I have to do work on when I can pay $20,000 less for something that's done? Some of it is very common sense, and sellers sometimes have a hard time understanding that. So you need to walk them through the
And,
market out there.
perhaps now, first of all, congrats on your listings. And you've been full-time in the business for how long, Alina?
October.
So less than a year. Congratulations. Now, you're in the learning phase too. Perhaps if you figured out how to ask more questions before you took the listings, you might have gotten a better price. Perhaps if you would have been able to present data differently, you might have a different outcome. And, perhaps if you were to have an abundance mindset where, it's a good deal for all or no deal, instead of letting a seller drive the bus, that might have an influence on the outcome. And I think our industry is plagued with people who, make an attempt to try to get the price correct, but are willing to accept a flawed price just because of fear of loss. Now, I see Mr. Garber up in the corner. Have you seen competitors in your industry that you think are prone to taking overpriced listings because of fear of loss or lack of skill?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I just this past week had a conversation with an agent from another company who I've known for many years, and he's got his own house on the market now, and it's been sitting. And so I know the house very well because we've socialized together, and I said to him, so you priced your house at $849. Don't you think that a more aggressive way to market your house and perhaps to have gotten better results would have been at $799? And he said, well, but I really need $849. And we talked a little bit longer, and I said to him, you're talking like a seller, not a realtor. And he was like, Yeah, you know, you're right. And yeah, I guess I'm going to have to rethink that. But in my area, yes, there's a company that we refer to as the Big Yellow House company that is known to take listings at high prices and then just to get them signed. And then they go back, you know, 2, 3 weeks into it and go for the price reduction. And I've lost a listing to them on one occasion where I priced a house for a client at 1,200,000, and they came in and said, "Oh no, you can get 1,500,000." And 6 months later, they sold the house for 1,200,000. And the guy came, you know, the seller said to me, "So yeah, I guess you were right, you know, with your 1,200,000 price." I said, "Well, except for the fact that had you gone out at 1,200,000, you might have gotten 1,300,000 or 1,400,000." So yeah, that's definitely an issue that's still around with price it high and then figure it out from there. I don't like that. I don't want to set myself up for that conversation of having to lower prices. Plus the fact that the first couple of weeks that a house is on the market is when you're going to get the most action. Except if you have the wrong price, then you've wasted that enthusiastic response.
Right. So over the years, I'm sure you've gotten to be very proficient, Robert, at threading that needle of having integrity, educating, and avoiding buying the listing, because that rarely works out to our advantage. Number one, you know, if you have integrity, you know, I think that's the white lie of this business, right? Where you're like, oh, well, I kind of told them, but I still took it. Because when you take a listing at a lottery style price, at a aspirational price that we know is not in the best interest of the seller, you know, a week later, the seller is thinking that you agreed with that. They're thinking that that's your price as well. Do you think more times than not that they don't really remember that you had suggested something else? They're like, no, you agreed with me. The seller's like, I convinced Robert, he agreed with me. My house was worth $849. That's why he took it. And then, you know, universally, they're disappointed and upset when it doesn't sell. Right. And then that conversation, there's amnesia that happens when you're talking about, remember we talked to you about, like, this was a little bit too high. Selective amnesia.
You know, that's part of the reason why I asked them to initial my CMAs so that we can always look back and see that this was the price that, you know, I had suggested early on, that you decided that you wanted to go higher, which is certainly your option. The other thing I wanted to say is I'm one of those agents who would walk away. Going back to your earlier point.
But let me ask you this question and answer it honestly. When you're prepared to walk away, do a lot of times the seller come back and say, "Wait, you know,
Yes.
you really," right? So, you know, my gut tells me in my experience that probably 9 out of 10, when you're prepared to walk away, are like, "Wait a second, you have that much resolution, you have that much conviction to the pricing that you're willing to leave my listing." And then they'll pay attention, because most other people will just tell them what they want to hear and then take a longer listing and try to work the price down. But if you know that that's not the right strategy, I think integrity directs you to walk away from that, or you know, to say, hey, you know, I might not be the right agent, because if I cost you 100,000 on your $1.1 million, $1.3 million property, you know, I don't need the money that bad, Robert. I don't want to I don't want to make 30 to cost you 100. So yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Like, just role play that in your head. Who's going to let you walk out the door when you're that honest? Now you can't be obnoxious, but you have to be able to thread that needle and say, look, you know, if I was going to cost you money by using a flawed strategy, would you be offended if I took a pass on this? So and I really I thank you for sharing that, and I think most people don't recognize. By the way, out of 10, how many would you say would probably not let you out the door if you had that conviction and evidence of what the price is worth, the home?
I would say that any time that I've said that and started to put my papers together and getting up to leave the table, I would say 10 out of 10 times they engage me in further conversation. That doesn't mean that I get 10 out of 10 listings, but at least we have the opportunity to have a more open and honest conversation. And I do get most of them, but not all of them.
So I'm going to wrap up with asking a question. What's the biggest problem in our industry, which is also the biggest opportunity? Anybody?
Right, it's always that either an agent there overpriced the property, or he buys the listing there. You know, that they, by not telling the buyer, I mean the seller, the truth there about the pricing.
Well, let me rephrase this. What's the biggest complaint in the industry? You probably all know about this one, right?
Lack of communication.
Lack of communication. Who said that?
Lisa from Florida.
Okay, Lisa from Florida. So lack of communication. And would you agree, as technology advances, communication gets worse?
Yes,
Right? Because people text, they don't want to talk, they hide behind technology. But in reality, at some point, we need to have communication. We need to be able to deliver value. And lack of communication is probably one of the biggest things that we can do to improve it. And Robert is talking about the communication with the seller at the table. There's lack of communication when you take a listing and it's not going well, and you hide for 2 weeks, and then you call them up and say, we need to lower the price. We should set guardrails for how we register feedback and set the right expectations and communication with our clients, because it makes it better. My business coach and mentor talks about, in the real estate business, if you pull up to your office and you see somebody's car and you don't want to go in the office, it's time to have a really difficult conversation with that agent or that employee. And I'm going to give you the parallel to that, which is when you see a call coming in from a client of yours and you're like, the house isn't selling, I don't know what I'm going to tell them this time, right? You need to change your strategy, right? You need to only onboard clients into your business that are positioned for you to do a good job, right? If you've been in the business long enough, you've come across, clients that you don't want to talk to because it's not working out well. And then you just have to do you have to look back at what could have been done different in that process. And it usually comes down to, maybe, I hate to use this term, but maybe letting a little white lie go by and letting Mr. or Mrs. Seller think that their house is worth more than it is. Or maybe it's that, you didn't do the right job at communicating all the feedback consistently, where, when they're calling you, it makes that conversation more awkward. So if you have that, that moral integrity, moral obligation to help people, you have the abundance mindset where it's okay to walk away, our careers will be much, much more fulfilling. And the marketplace, interest rates, crazy clients, crazy buyers and sellers will never have an impact on our business. Okay, we can always grow our business. Our business is impacted by one thing, it's the actions or inactions that we do. Okay, we all start January 1, the same place, zero business. Okay, we just have to, do the right things to come up with the outcome that we want. So you guys are the real troopers, and the Friday before a holiday, you're investing in yourself. I really appreciate that. Have a wonderful, safe Memorial Day weekend. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Happy
Guys,
Memorial Day.
don't forget the reason why we celebrate Memorial Day. It's more than just a 3-day holiday. So thanks very much.